Well, welcome to another episode of Coronacation. I'm Naomi White in Brisbane, Australia, and this afternoon I'm joined by Angela Mollard in Sydney. How are you, Angela?
I'm well, thanks.
Angela, thanks so much for joining me. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a journalist and commentator, and I have a podcast where I commentate on the royals. So I do a lot of news and a lot of feature writing. So I interview a lot of celebrities, and I have sort of 6 or 7 different gigs. So I have a newspaper column, and then I write feature interviews, and then I have a podcast. Then I do, as I say, TV commentary. And then I sometimes do news and opinion for news.com.au, sort of write a piece for them about once a week, usually highly opinionated.
Well, I love your pieces, actually. I look forward to reading those. And you're also an author too, aren't you?
That's right. I wrote a book about 5 years ago called The Smallest Things, which I will never do again. Well, not right now. Writing a book is a lot of sitting down and a lot of thinking, and I've realised I like short form. I realized that it's not something I want to do immediately, and if I did it again I'd want to write fiction. This was a non-fiction piece, but then occasionally I have an idea and I think, yeah, no, actually I would like to write that, but then I just remind myself how many 5 o'clock mornings I had.
Oh,
The garbage truck, it was every Tuesday morning I'd listen to that garbage truck going down the street and just thought, how many of us are up, just me and the garbos?
oh well, I love your articles anyway, so enjoy those for the time being. Angela, tell us how COVID-19 has affected you.
Well, very early on, the television network I worked for, Channel 7, emailed and said, we're giving you a special dispensation to come in. We've shut all commentary. So I'm a commentator. So it means I come in every, 3 or 4 times a week, and I would commentate on the news or celebrities or royals or opinion pieces generally. And the first thing I got was a call saying, we're giving you, you're going to keep coming in. And the reason largely is in a television studio, they're quite small. Obviously, we had to social distance. And so it went from me sitting on a couch to actually having to sit on the other side of the studio. There's also the hair and makeup issue, because everybody has to have hair and makeup. So initially it started that I could still have hair and makeup done, but then that moved to being, I'd just do my hair because I didn't want to get too close to my face. So that changed, but mostly what it did in terms of the content is that I then was moved off talking more in terms of opinion to doing what we call explainers. And what they are is that as soon as the government gave a press conference in Australia around coronavirus, I would then come in and digest that for the viewers as to what it meant, what the implications, whether those were financial, whether they were social. And I'd talk about sort of giving that information back, because when you listen to a press conference, the Prime Minister has generally been going from anything from 15 minutes through to an hour. And of course, all our state premiers have been giving multiple press conferences as well. How it affected me was that I've never been in such a fast-moving news story. So every day there was some new either policy or legislation or change as to how we could live. And explaining that to the public was really hard. So you have to be accurate. That was the main thing. Instead of opinion, which is you're allowed to say what you think, this had to be factually accurate. And that was the biggest change, but so exciting. So it would be like I'm talking to you now. You would be the Prime Minister, you'd be speaking, that would end and it would flick straight to me, and I would have to digest what had been said and talk to the hosts of the program about what that meant and the implications. And I remember very early on when we were talking economics, it came into my head and I thought, this is going to be an issue of lives and livelihood. And it's not often that I select words really well, but it was one of those days and I thought, you nailed it. It is lives and livelihoods. And this is really early on. So it's good, but I made mistakes as well, because typically I'm used to sitting on a panel looking at somebody a metre away from me, and there's eye contact. And so because we had to be on the other side of the studio, you wear an earpiece. You have to flick sometimes to pictures coming up on screen. It's a lot harder. So here I am in my early 50s, and I've done journalism for a long time. This was a quick learning curve, and I love it. I love learning new things. So it
Oh
was
my God, I can't even imagine that. That sounds very stressful. Do you think the Australian public were more interested in that than, like, do you think people needed translation from what ScoMo was saying?
Look, I think that there was so much coming at them that when the press conferences ended, you needed to think about it. And I know this from speaking to my parents in New Zealand. So Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister there, has given press conferences at 1 o'clock every day. And I think in Australia, for instance, in New South Wales, we've had Gladys Berejiklian, the Premier, doing 8 a.m. And then it tends to go New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, and they each have their time slots, and then the Prime Minister later in the day. I think the public didn't have anything else to do, so they were really engaged with it. So audiences went up, and I think people, because it was so rapid and it was changing so quickly, and television is that medium where people love the immediacy of it, and there's nothing, when something's breaking, yes, it'll break online, but sometimes people want the visual element of it as well.
So what were the new skills that you think that you honed through this period?
I think moving fast. Like, quite often I have time, I'll have an hour. So for instance, I did television this morning. We were discussing the fact that Queensland and New South Wales have a lot more freedom than Victoria. We were talking about, have you seen that trend of copying an artwork? So people take the artwork and then they pose in it, and that's a kind of thing. So I have an hour's notice to talk about it. So you can think about something interesting that you want to say, but when you're responding to news, you have to be, do you know the other hard thing? You have to be very clear. But I think the skill I learned most was tone. So tone is am I going to convey optimism? Am I, this is very serious. This is a deadly disease that was killing people that we didn't know the ramifications of. I mean, at that stage, it was going up that way. I mean, now, of course, we flattened the curve, but when it was going like that, it was not having too somber a face, but not having too, but not being too happy. It's getting the tone right. And I found that really hard, because generally I'd be talking about, in any news segment, I'd be talking about something serious, and then there'd be something light. We have light and shade in television. So you'd always have some of both, and so you'd always flip upwards just before the end, so that you leave viewers with something uplifting or heartening or joyous. Now, of course, in a serious situation, when you're talking about people's freedoms being curtailed, or you're talking about massive financial impact, getting that tone was really hard. And sometimes I'd see it, because you see the monitor, but you have to look into the camera, if that makes sense. So I have to look straight ahead, but just under it is the monitor. So there's this compunction to look at yourself, but you can't, because then your eyes. Yeah. I was always mindful of what my face looked like, because I wanted people to feel that they were getting information. But I was also, there was a warmth there as well, and that's quite hard, actually. So yeah, I learned that. I learned when your earpiece falls out and you can't hear the host. That's quite difficult. And then of course I've done a lot of writing around opinion on this, and the nature of opinion writing. And I think a lot of I quite often get emails or messages on Twitter where people they really disagree with what I'm saying, or they think it's not fair. Now, opinion's completely different to news. Opinion is, I'm allowed to say what I think. So for instance, I've written a piece in the last 24 hours urging Australians to download the COVID-19 app, because I've done a lot of research. I don't think there's really significant privacy issues. I think it's, as our Prime Minister has said, it's our ticket out of lockdown. So I'm a huge fan of it. I've done the research. There we go. It keeps happening. So I think that the key for it is, for me, with opinion, is it has to say something. You can't say, oh yeah, I think this, but then I think this. You actually have to come out and say something. So I've written this very strong piece saying people should be downloading the app, and this is a tracing app, and if you look at how tracing happens manually, it's painstaking. So this would be, hugely beneficial, but people don't like to be told what another person thinks necessarily. So I have to have a pretty thick skin. And so for instance, this piece, there's 250 comments on it. I imagine half of them don't agree with me, but I typically would not read those. I wouldn't read the comments. I'm paid to put it out there. And as long as it's accurate, that's what I focus on.
Being a public figure, I can't imagine it's helpful to read the comments.
No, no. Look, I think I've got tougher. In the early days, I would want to engage with it. Now I don't, because everyone does have an opinion, and the person on Twitter's allowed an opinion too. That's their right. We live in a country with free speech, and we're lucky to have that. So yeah, it's but I don't need to beat myself up about it. When I get things wrong, readers love to email and say if I've grammatically got something wrong. I can't stand making grammatical errors or a spelling mistake, or doesn't happen too often, but when it does, I really remember it.
Yeah, I can understand that. Well, what advice have you got for others, or what perspectives have you got that might help others around the world right now?
Look, I don't know if I don't know. I'm a textbook catastrophizer in my previous life. So if a little thing goes wrong, like say 6 or 7 years ago, I had a newspaper column. It was in 3 different publications, and then one publication had to drop down the newspaper size. It didn't have room for it, and I lost 1/3 of my income on that particular job. And I really catastrophized about it, because it was sort of my main income. And I used that time to diversify, to look at where I could use my skills in different ways. And it was a really good thing to have to go through. So this time around, my work is definitely in jeopardy. One company I work for has been bought out by another. During the midst of this, there's been 140 redundancies. Another company that I've worked for has dropped the pay by 20%. Everyone is now, and the third company I work for is 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off for staff. Because I'm freelance, I'm subject to some of these, but not all of them. But 2 things I think I've learned is that I use my own skill set to try and work really hard to find new avenues of employment. And so for instance, I typically write a newspaper column on a Monday. Now I'm writing it on a Sunday, because I know there's another job I can do on a Monday if an editor wants an opinion that day. So I can capitalize on the fact that I'm ready and able to do that. But what I've learned is that I'm not to catastrophize as much. And I think, and I'm sure lots of people who watch this would agree, the fact that we're all going through it, it doesn't feel so personal. So if you do lose some work, it's not about you this time. And in fact, is it ever really about you? Yes, sometimes. If you're out and out sacked, yes, it's about you. But if you are made redundant, or if financial circumstances mean that you lose work, it's mostly not about you. And particularly if you had a reasonably long association with the company. It's made me also, what I've learned is that I'm really grateful. Australia is doing so well. Politically, all that sort of partisan bickering that was going on in politics is sort of given way to this very collegial approach. We have a different sort of country. We're politically managed quite differently. We have a federal and then states. And that's a lot of communication, consultation, and working together. And I think I feel very grateful where we live in a country where not only do we have very sound politics, good decision making, and I think for the most part, our leaders have made good choices, and hence we've seen the flattening of the curve. But we live in a really beautiful environment. And what I've learned is that I actually love nature. I don't need to be in a city. I don't need shops. I don't need, I have makeup and clothes for my job, but I don't need things. What I really need is a beautiful sunny day and to go for a walk or to play Frisbee with my daughter. Quite simple things that actually make me happy. I think the other thing is we've had really good weather, and you realise that having good weather really changes things. Anyway, things have loosened a bit in the last weekend. I don't want to get busy again. I like the slow. I wrote this piece where I said, what is it going to be like BC AD, before Corona, after distancing? And I think, if I have anything that I want to change about my life is to make it less busy, not say yes to everything. And I wonder about when we had little children, that every birthday invitation that they got, you would take them to that party. You wouldn't really even think about it. So everyone would invite, loads of kids. And so you find yourself all the time going to these birthday parties, when actually it would have been nicer to sit at home and play Monopoly together, rather than having to say yes to everything. And I think that's one thing I've learned. I've got older children now, but I felt that compunction to always go to everything, to attend everything, to do the right thing, to be engaged. I could do half of what I do and be very happy in terms of, and by that I mean socially. Yeah, and I've really enjoyed quietness, just the stillness. I work from home anyway, generally, but that's been magnified. I really enjoy that, and the other thing I love using leftovers, because I'm concerned now about my income dropping. I've been quite frugal, almost in the sort of 1950s way about cooking and making sure that I can make more with one meal or make something for lunch the next day. And, if I was in the city, I would buy lunch and things. And I really love just paring it down. I love looking at my bank account and money's not going out of it. And that feels really sensible. There's something kind of old-fashioned, prudent, sensible about it that actually and I think that speaks to sustainability and our consumption. And I think we come out of this, we won't consume as much, we won't be able to, but I think it dovetails neatly with the notion of treating the planet better.
Absolutely. Well, what a beautiful way to end. So Angela, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Some really fantastic perspectives, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
See you later.
See ya.